I walked into my historic brownstone in Lincoln Park, Chicago, to the sound of my life literally being torn apart. The crash sent up a cloud of drywall dust that hung in the air like a white fog. I froze in the doorway. My suitcase slipped from my hand as I watched my father and my brother swing sledgehammers against the glass walls of my custom-built sunroom, my sanctuary. My father didn't even stop when he saw me. He just laughed, looking over his shoulder at my brother. "She's not going to run out a pregnant woman," he said. He was wrong. My pulse didn't even quicken. In my line of work, when a structure is compromised, you don't mourn the rubble. You assess the liability. I took a step back into the freezing winter air. The cold hit my face like a slap. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady when I dialed 911. "I need to report a breaking and entering and destruction of property in progress," I said in a calm, almost clinical voice. "2 men have broken into my house and are destroying the property. Yes, I'm safe. No, they don't know I've called." I watched through the front window as the squad cars arrived, silent at first, then bursting with red and blue lights that reflected off the wet pavement. The officers stormed in with their weapons drawn, shouting commands that cut through the noise of the sledgehammers. "On the ground, now!" My father dropped his tool, more annoyed than scared. My brother Jack froze, his eyes wide as he realized this wasn't just a family squabble. This was the law. I saw them forced to the floor amidst the dust of my shattered walls, their hands secured with zip ties behind their backs. When the officers brought me inside to verify my identity, the air was thick, heavy with a white powder. It coated everything, my antique rugs, my books, my plants. It stuck in my throat like ash. "This is a misunderstanding, officer," my father said, trying to push himself up with that authoritative tone he used to control everyone. "We're her family. She knows we're here." I looked at the officer, then at my father. "I don't know these men," I said. "They do not have permission to be here. They have destroyed my property. I want to press charges." My father's face turned purple. "Hazel, stop this nonsense right now. You're making a scene. Tell them the truth." "I am telling the truth," I replied, turning my back on him. I showed them the deed to my house, my ID, and my time-stamped flight itinerary, proving I had just landed. The officer nodded, his expression hardening as he turned back to my father. "You're under arrest for trespassing and destruction of property," he said. As they were being led away, my mother's car screeched into the driveway. She ran up the steps, shouting my name. "How could you? They're your family!" I looked at her, then at the ruins of my sunroom. This wasn't just property damage, this was biological warfare. My home was my skin, the only layer of protection I had against the world. They didn't just break a wall, they violated my sanctuary, proving once and for all that to them, I had no boundaries worth respecting. I looked at the officer. "Her too," I said. "She was the getaway driver." The officer hesitated, but I held my ground. "She knew they were here. She's an accomplice." As they put my mother in the back of a second squad car, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was the feeling of a heavy, suffocating weight finally being lifted. I stood there in the wreck of my home, the icy wind blowing through the hole in the wall, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, terrifyingly free. The house fell silent, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence of a tomb. I walked through the debris, my boots crunching on glass and plaster. The wind gusted through the gaping hole where my sunroom used to be, carrying the smell of cold rain and ruin. I pulled my coat tighter, but the chill was coming from inside. This wasn't just a house, it was my history. I bought it 5 years ago, a wreck everyone said should be torn down. I spent nights sanding floors until my hands bled. I spent weekends hunting for period-correct hardware and scouring salvage yards. I restored it brick by brick, while my parents called it a money pit and laughed at my ambition. And now they had taken a sledgehammer to it. I went into my office, the only room untouched, and opened my laptop. I didn't waste energy on tears. I treated the betrayal like a diseased tree. Isolate, identify, remove. I opened a spreadsheet I had named Jack's Fund. It was a document I had kept hidden even from myself, a record of every time I had bailed my brother out. $50,000. That was the number staring back at me. $50,000 in self-inflicted emergencies, in rent he couldn't pay because he thought he was too good for a normal job, in get-rich-quick schemes he swore would be his big break. I scrolled through dates and amounts with a nausea that had nothing to do with the dust. Why did I do it? Why did I keep giving him money when I knew I'd never see it again? Looking back, the truth hit me like a punch. It wasn't because I believed in him, not because I thought this time would be different. I kept bailing him out because I was trapped in the sunk cost fallacy of blood. I had invested so much love, so much hope, and so much money into my relationship with my brother that walking away felt like admitting defeat. It meant accepting that the first $1,000, the first $10,000, the first $25,000 were all gone for nothing. It meant accepting that my investment in my family was a total loss. So I kept throwing good money after bad, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if I gave a little more, he would finally become the brother I wanted him to be. I was betting on a relationship that didn't exist, playing a slot machine rigged against me, hoping for a jackpot that would never come. I looked at my ruined home, at the destruction they had caused in less than an hour. They didn't just break a wall, they broke the spell. The $50,000 was gone. The relationship was gone. And my house, my beautiful, historic house, was wounded. But staring at that spreadsheet, a cold determination settled inside me. I wasn't throwing one more dollar after what was lost. I was closing this account for good. I saved the file and opened a new document. I named it Evidence. I started writing, recording every detail of the break-in, every threat, every dollar stolen. This was no longer a family dispute. This was war. And I had just realized I'd been the only one fighting with one hand tied behind my back. The considerations were over. I wasn't just going to rebuild my wall. I was going to build a fortress, and they were going to pay for every single brick. The next morning, my parents posted their own bail in Jack's. I knew because my phone started vibrating on the desk like a furious insect, buzzing nonstop with notifications. I didn't answer it. I let it tremble on the wood, watching the screen light up with messages from my mother, Grace. When the buzzing finally stopped, I picked it up. No apologies, no explanations, just a barrage of images, ultrasounds, blurry black and white photos of a curled, vulnerable fetus. Then came the text. "This is your niece. She was going to sleep in that room. You threw her out into the cold." I stared at the screen, an icy knot in my stomach. It was brilliant, in the worst possible way. They were weaponizing the pregnancy. They were using an unborn baby as a human shield, daring me to attack. They knew that no matter what they did, what they stole, what they broke, the world would see a pregnant woman and a baby, and I would be the monster. I opened social media. My mother had already posted a long, tearful status. "Please pray for our family. Our daughter Hazel had us arrested for trying to help her brother prepare a nursery for his baby. She threw her own unborn niece out onto the street in the freezing cold. We are heartbroken." The comments were already pouring in. How could she? That's just evil. Family is everything. Karma will get her. My brother Jack sent me a direct message. "My lawyer says I can sue you for emotional distress. You traumatized Ellie. If anything happens to the baby, it's on you." I put the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the street. The guilt was suffocating. It squeezed my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was wrong. I was cruel. It was just a room. It was just money. Maybe I should have let them stay. Maybe I should have let them take it. But then I stopped. I took a deep breath and forced myself to see the situation clearly. I dissected their messages like a forensic auditor, breaking the emotional manipulation down into its parts. Fear, obligation, and guilt. The fog. They were using fear. The threat of public shame, the threat of legal action. They were using obligation, the idea that family owes each other everything, no matter the cost. And they were using guilt, the manufactured image of an innocent baby, but none of it was real. My mother wasn't asking for help. She was daring me to be the villain. She was counting on my fear of looking like a monster to push me back into obedience. She was betting I'd rather be used than hated. She bet wrong again. I looked back at the broken wall, the cold air seeping into my home. I wasn't the villain. I was the victim who had finally decided to fight back. And I would not let them use an innocent child to protect themselves from the consequences of their own actions. I picked up my phone and screenshotted my mother's post. Then I screenshotted the police report. I didn't post it, not yet. I just saved it in the folder labeled Evidence. Then I texted my contractor. I need a forensic damage assessment today. This wasn't a family feud anymore. This was a war, and I was done fighting with my heart. From now on, I would fight with my head. I treated my house like a crime scene. I hired a damage appraiser, a man named Thomas who specialized in insurance claims and structural damage. He walked through the rubble with a clipboard and a tape measure, tapping beams, shaking his head at the clumsy destruction. "This is going to be expensive," he said. "The plaster and molding are period-specific. You can't just patch this. You have to restore it." I nodded, jotting down his estimates. $30,000, $40,000, maybe more. I added it to my spreadsheet. Every dollar, every hour of my time, every sleepless night. Then Thomas stopped. He was looking at a stack of papers I'd pulled from the county recorder's office that morning. "Wait a second," he said, frowning. "Where's the permit?" "There is no permit," I said. "I didn't authorize anything." "I don't mean for the demolition." He pointed to a document I hadn't looked at closely. "This says a home equity loan for $75,000 was taken out against this property last month. The work order has this address." I went cold. A loan I never took out. I didn't need a loan. My house was paid off. I snatched the paper from him. It was a copy of a loan agreement from a local credit union. The borrower was listed as Hazel Vance. The address was correct. The amount was $75,000. And at the bottom of the page, in ink that looked disturbingly familiar, was my signature. I stared at it, my mind racing. The date next to the signature was from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I was in Barcelona, presenting a design proposal for a new botanical garden. I had the passport stamps to prove it. I couldn't have signed this document. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was no longer just about my parents breaking in. This was no longer just about my brother being an entitled freeloader. This was identity theft. This was financial fraud. I looked at the witness signature. Henry Vance. My father. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. Jack didn't just decide to build a nursery. He financed it by stealing my identity, forging my signature, and taking out a loan against my own home. And my father helped him. They had stolen $75,000 from me before they ever even picked up a sledgehammer. They had mortgaged my future to pay for their golden boy's present. I looked at Thomas. "I need you to document absolutely everything," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned. Every nail, every scratch, every lie. I put the loan agreement into my evidence folder. It was the final nail in the coffin. The family dispute was over. The criminal investigation was just beginning. 2 days later, my father called. He didn't yell. He sounded reasonable, almost serene. He said they wanted to see me to make things right. He said Jack had left some expensive tools in the sunroom and just wanted to pick them up. He said they were willing to pay for the repairs if I dropped the charges. I agreed. I told him we should meet somewhere neutral to sign an agreement. I gave him the address of an office building downtown. When they arrived, my father, mother, and Jack walked in confidently. Jack even had a little smirk on his face, as if he thought he'd won again. They brought his wife, Ellie, with them, probably as a prop for sympathy. She looked exhausted, one hand resting protectively on her belly. They walked into the conference room I'd directed them to. My father sat at the head of the table, ready to dictate terms. "We're glad you finally saw reason," he began. I didn't sit down. I stood by the door, watching them get comfortable. Then I slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table. "What's this?" my father asked, picking it up. "It's the loan agreement," I said. "The one Jack took out in my name. The one you signed as a witness." My father froze. Jack's smirk vanished. "You forged my signature," I said, my voice low but echoing in the room. "You stole my identity. You committed fraud. That isn't a family misunderstanding. That's a felony." My mother stood up. "Hazel, please. We can fix this. We can pay it back." "No, you can't," I said, "because I've already given this document to the detectives waiting in the next room." At that moment, the door behind me opened. 2 detectives walked in, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. Jack shot to his feet, panic finally replacing his arrogance. "Dad, do something!" But my father couldn't do anything. He just stared at the handcuffs the detective was pulling from his belt. "Henry Vance, Jack Vance, you are under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy," the detective said. As they were cuffed, the room filled with protests. Jack was openly sobbing now, loud, ugly sobs about his baby, about how he couldn't go to jail. My mother was screaming at me, calling me a traitor. I looked at Ellie. She was standing in the corner, pale and paralyzed, looking from Jack to me with wide, terrified eyes. I walked over to her, reached into my purse, and pulled out a brochure I had picked up earlier. It was for a women's shelter that helps victims of financial abuse. "They lied to you, too," I said softly, pressing it into her hand. "He has no money. He stole it from me. If you stay with them, you'll get dragged down, too. Get out." Ellie looked at the brochure, then at Jack as he was pulled toward the door. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, and walked out of the room, away from them. I watched the detectives lead my father and brother away. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a lock snapping shut. It was the sound of a door closing forever. And as I stood alone in the empty conference room, I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. It's been 6 months since I last saw my family in that room. 6 months of silence. 6 months of peace. My sunroom is finished. I hired a new contractor, someone who respected the history of the house, and we rebuilt it, better than before. The glass is triple paned, designed to withstand the harshest cold fronts. The floors are heated. I filled it with rare tropical plants, creating a living ecosystem that thrives under my care. It's a greenhouse in the truest sense, a place where I control the climate, where I decide what grows and what gets pruned. Jack is serving a 3-year sentence in a federal correctional institution for fraud and identity theft. My parents lost their house. They had to sell it to pay for Jack's legal defense and the court-ordered restitution to me. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that they're renting a small apartment out in the suburbs. I don't know the address, and I don't want to. I deleted the family contact group from my phone the day after the arrest. It was a small action, just a tap on a screen, but it felt like letting go of an anchor. I didn't block them. I just erased them. They are no longer part of my landscape, just as they are no longer part of my life. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Ellie. I heard she went back home to her parents in Wisconsin. I hope she's okay. I hope she understands that leaving was the bravest thing she could have done for her baby. I saved her from a lifetime of being used, even if she hates me for how I did it. That's a burden I'm willing to carry. Now I sit in my sunroom, drinking tea and watching the cold rain fall outside. The drops, sometimes turning to sleet, patter against the glass roof, insulating me from the chill. For years, I thought family was something you were born into, a debt you had to spend the rest of your life repaying. I thought love was a transaction and loyalty was an obligation. But as I look at the life I've rebuilt, the thriving plants, the restored walls, the quiet stability, I understand the truth. Family isn't biology. Biology is an accident. Family is a choice. It's the people who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your success without envy, who don't break into your home to steal your future. I had to cut away the rot to save the tree. It was a painful surgery, and the scars are still there, hidden under the new paint. But the tree is alive. It's growing. And for the first time in my life, its roots are deep and its branches are free. If you had to choose between your peace and your family's demands, what would you choose? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more stories of justice.